A vast armada of warships, sleek and menacing, drifting into our solar system. Their hulls gleam under the dim glow of distant starlight, each vessel a fortress bristling with weapons capable of turning planets to ash. The fleet moves in perfect formation, silent, unstoppable, absolute. Their captains stand on command bridges lined with alien symbols, watching screens that display a blue-green world spinning in the void. Earth, a primitive rock with primitive people. No interstellar fleets, no planetary shields, no ancient alliances to call upon. The invaders have done this 1,000 times before. Entire civilizations have collapsed under their rule without a fight. Why would Earth be any different? They expect no resistance. They expect us to surrender, to kneel, to beg. What they don't realize is this: we were polite because we hadn't been tested. Until now. Welcome to HFY Chronicles-849, where we explore the untold stories of humanity's strength, resilience, and defiance against the impossible. Every great journey starts with a few brave explorers. Right now, this channel is just beginning, and your support means everything. If you enjoy unraveling the mysteries of the universe, hit subscribe. It's free, and it helps us grow this community together. Now let's step back for a moment. Before the invasion, before the warnings, before Earth's name was whispered with fear in the halls of power across the galaxy, let's understand how we got here. The galactic community is ancient. Empires have risen and fallen across the stars for hundreds of thousands of years. Countless species have come and gone, civilizations stretching across whole clusters of the Milky Way before vanishing like dust in the solar wind. The strongest survive. The weak are conquered. That is the unspoken law. For millennia, the dominant species of the galaxy have expanded, assimilating lesser worlds, enforcing their rule with fleets that blacken the skies and armies that march without mercy. Some planets submit willingly, eager to bask in the wisdom of their new overlords. Others resist briefly before being erased, and then there was Earth. At first, we were ignored, an insignificant planet orbiting an average star in a quiet arm of the galaxy. No great resources, no sprawling spacefaring empire, just a young, chaotic species struggling to understand their own world. But then, something strange happened. The first reports on humanity confused the great empires. Our civilization should have taken tens of thousands of years to develop, like the others before us. But humans? Humans did it in mere millennia. We moved from hunting in the forests to building vast, interconnected cities in the blink of an eye. We crossed oceans, charted the stars, and reshaped our planet with machines in a fraction of the time it took other species to take their first steps toward civilization. Even worse, our history was filled with conflict. Wars so devastating that any other species would have gone extinct. Yet every time we fell, we rose again, stronger, smarter, more determined. It didn't make sense. Other species evolved slowly, carefully, their societies built on cooperation and stability. Humanity? Humanity thrived on chaos. Every war, every disaster, every impossible challenge only seemed to push us forward. And then there was something else. Something far more unsettling. Humanity had no concept of a limited war. Other species fought over resources, over territory, over political disputes. But humans? When humans fought, it was total war. Our history was filled with conflicts that left entire regions in ruin, strategies designed not just to win, but to ensure the enemy never rose again. No other species fought like us. No other species thought like us. That terrified them. To understand what happened next, you have to understand them. The rulers of the galaxy, the ones who believed themselves invincible, the Zal-Zoroth Dominion, an empire so vast that even its own historians had long since lost track of how many worlds fell under its rule. Their fleets had conquered civilizations that once burned brighter than humanity could even imagine. Their warriors had marched across 1,000 shattered worlds, leaving nothing behind but silence. To them, war was not an act of desperation. It was tradition. It was ritual. It was sport. So, they watched. They studied us. They whispered in their darkened chambers about whether Earth should be left alone or removed before it became a threat. But ultimately, they decided we were too small, too primitive, too polite to be dangerous. For years, humanity played its role well. We smiled. We traded. We learned their ways, respected their borders, and presented ourselves as the curious newcomers, eager to join the great galactic civilization. Until one day, the strongest in the galaxy made a mistake. They tested us. And humanity? Humanity answered. For over 50,000 years, the Zalzoroth had remained unchallenged. No species had ever withstood their onslaught. Some had tried. All had failed. So when their long-range probes detected Earth, a young, reckless civilization just beginning to scratch at the edges of space, they barely paid attention. We were an afterthought, a curiosity at best, but then something changed. Humanity's technology, primitive by galactic standards, should have been advancing at a predictable pace. And yet, it wasn't. We leaped forward, faster than anyone had anticipated. We were bending the laws of physics in ways that shouldn't have been possible for a species that hadn't even mastered interstellar travel. In just a few short centuries, we had gone from wooden sailing ships to digital empires, from horse-drawn carriages to engines capable of breaking free of our planet's gravity. And worse still, we adapted faster than any species the Dominion had ever encountered. The Zalzoroth had seen this pattern before, but never on this scale. Civilizations that advanced too quickly were unpredictable, dangerous. If left unchecked, they could become problems for even the strongest empires. The Dominion had always dealt with such species the same way, snuffed them out before they became a true threat. And so, a decision was made. The invasion would be swift, surgical. Earth would be brought to its knees before it even understood what had happened. They would not offer terms. There would be no negotiations, no warnings. For the first time in history, the Dominion's war fleet was coming for Earth. The arrival. The first signs were subtle, so subtle that humanity didn't notice them at first. Minor disruptions in deep space signals. Strange gravitational fluctuations near the edges of our solar system. NASA and other space agencies wrote them off as anomalies, misreadings of instruments, nothing to be concerned about. Then, astronomers spotted them. Artificial objects. Massive. Moving fast. At first, there was confusion. Were these asteroids? Rogue planets? A bizarre new cosmic phenomenon? But then the objects changed course. They were accelerating, directly toward Earth. The world's governments scrambled for answers. Telescopes and radar stations were locked onto the approaching fleet, gathering as much data as possible. What they saw defied belief. The ships were enormous, larger than anything humanity had ever built. Some were the size of entire cities, their hulls reinforced with unknown metals that absorbed and refracted light in ways that made them nearly invisible to traditional tracking systems. They moved with eerie precision, completely silent in the vacuum of space. And they weren't alone. Smaller vessels swarmed around the larger ones, hundreds, thousands of them, each one capable of delivering destruction on a planetary scale. This was not an exploration mission. This was not a diplomatic envoy. This was an invasion. For the first time in history, Earth was no longer alone, and our first contact with an alien civilization would be war. The world's reaction, panic, chaos. The news spread like wildfire. Governments held emergency meetings behind closed doors, their top scientists and military strategists working frantically to understand what they were dealing with. Was there any hope for diplomacy? Could this be avoided? Could Earth survive? An enemy so advanced that they had crossed the stars just to crush us? The answer, according to every expert, was simple. No. Humanity was outmatched in every conceivable way. Our most powerful weapons were primitive compared to the technologies these invaders possessed. Our armies were nothing against their war. Machines. For the first time in our history, we faced an enemy that we could not fight, and yet, we refused to surrender. Because if there was one thing that defined humanity, it was this. We did not accept the impossible. We defied it. Scientists and engineers worked around the clock, analyzing every scrap of data they could gather. Militaries, around the world prepared for a fight they knew they couldn't win. The best minds on the planet came together, not just from one country but from all of them, and something began to shift. For thousands of years, humanity had fought amongst itself, nation against nation, ideology against ideology. But now, we had something greater, something more terrifying than any war we had ever waged against one another. For the first time in history, humanity was united, and we were about to prove to the galaxy that Earth was not just another world to be conquered. We were something else entirely, something the Zal-Zoroth had never faced before. The Zal-Zoroth Dominion believed the battle was already won. From their perspective, humanity was just another primitive species, one that had only barely begun to grasp the vastness of the universe. Our planet was rich in resources, but more importantly, it occupied a strategic position on the galactic map, a perfect staging ground for further expansion into the unexplored fringes of the spiral arm. In their minds, the conquest of Earth was inevitable. They had done this before. Countless times. They had crushed empires older and stronger than humanity. Civilizations that had ruled entire star systems had fallen before their might. Species that had been capable of interstellar travel for millennia had been wiped from existence when they dared resist. And yet, here they were, staring down at a world that had barely even left its own atmosphere. It would be easy, effortless, a single strike, a demonstration of power, a precise and overwhelming show of force that would leave humanity broken and begging for mercy. The first strike, it began with a single ship, a scout vessel that moved through the darkness like a silent predator, slipping past Earth's early warning, systems undetected. It settled into high orbit, its massive sensors scanning the surface below. The Zal-Zoroth were not interested in negotiations. They did not issue ultimatums. They did not send ambassadors. Instead, they unleashed a weapon unlike anything Earth had ever seen, a gravitic lance, a device that could bend the very fabric of space, sending ripples through a planet's atmosphere, causing destruction on a scale that defied understanding. It was designed to destabilize continents, rupture tectonic plates, and trigger devastating earthquakes that would cripple any resistance before it even had a chance to begin. It had worked on dozens of other worlds before, but not on Earth, because the Zal-Zoroth had underestimated something they couldn't have possibly understood. Humanity's history was built on surviving extinction. For millions of years, this planet had been battered by cataclysms, asteroid impacts, supervolcanic eruptions, ice ages that should have wiped us out. And yet, life persisted. More than that, it evolved, it adapted. The weapon struck. Shock waves rippled through the atmosphere. Tidal waves surged across coastlines. Earthquakes rumbled beneath the surface. Cities trembled. Bridges collapsed. The world shook. And then, it stopped. The planet absorbed the impact, adjusting as it had always done. The destruction was catastrophic, yes, but not total. Not nearly enough to break us. The Zal-Zoroth commanders watched in confusion. On any other world, this would have been the end. The people would have fallen to their knees, overwhelmed by fear and despair. Surrender would have been inevitable. But Earth was different. Instead of breaking, humanity fought back. The response. Within hours, every major government declared a global state of emergency. But this wasn't just a military matter. It was something greater. Something that hadn't happened in thousands of years. The world was unified. No more borders. No more divisions. No more nations standing alone. For the first time in history, humanity wasn't fighting itself. We were fighting them, and we adapted faster than the Zal-Zoroth could have ever imagined. Even before the first attack, our scientists had been working furiously, analyzing the incoming fleet. Every radio wave, every energy signature, every piece of alien technology was studied with relentless focus. Within days, we had learned more about the enemy than they had ever expected, and then the impossible happened. We hacked them. Humanity had always been masters of information warfare. Our civilization had spent centuries refining the art of cyber conflict, hacking, counter-hacking, exploiting systems in ways that even our own creators never anticipated. The Zal-Zoroth had been arrogant. They assumed their technology was too advanced, their encryption too perfect, their firewalls impenetrable. They had never encountered a species that thought like we did. So when their systems came under attack, when their targeting arrays malfunctioned, when their communication relays were hijacked, when their warships suddenly found themselves receiving contradictory commands, they didn't understand what was happening. It was chaos, and we weren't done. The first counterattack with their invasion. Fleet still assembling, humanity launched its first strike, not with massive warships or planetary defenses. Those didn't exist yet. We used what we had. Our satellites were repurposed into kinetic weapons. Old nuclear stockpiles, once seen as relics of outdated conflicts, were secretly modified for deep space detonation. Even civilian space programs were converted into emergency strike teams. And then, we struck. The Zalzaroth scout ship, the one that had fired the first shot, never saw it coming. A barrage of repurposed space debris, moving at speeds faster than a bullet, tore through its hull, puncturing its reinforced plating like paper. Explosions rippled through its structure, and within seconds, the ship was reduced to drifting wreckage. The first Zalzaroth vessel in history to be destroyed by an unspacefaring species. The message was clear. Earth would not go quietly. The galaxy watches. As the battle escalated, something unexpected happened. The rest of the galactic community took notice. For centuries, most species had avoided the Zalzaroth, too afraid to challenge them. The Dominion was simply too strong, too well established. But Earth was different. Despite our technological inferiority, despite the overwhelming odds, we were not just resisting. We were adapting, we were learning, and, more importantly, we were hurting them. Word spread across the stars. Broadcasts of Earth's defiance were intercepted and transmitted across the galaxy. Species that had long lived in fear began to watch closely. Some even dared to hope. Because if humanity could stand against the strongest force in the galaxy, what else could we do? And what would happen when the Zalzaroth realized the truth? That their greatest mistake was thinking Earth would ever surrender. The Zalzaroth Dominion was no stranger to resistance. They had crushed rebellions before. Species that fought back only to be extinguished. Their worlds reduced to little more than ruins and memories. But Earth was proving different. The destruction of their scout ship was not just a setback. It was an insult. The loss of a single vessel would normally be inconsequential to an empire spanning thousands of worlds. But the way it had happened, brought down by a civilization that had barely begun exploring its own solar system, was something the Dominion had never encountered. To them, it wasn't just resistance, it was defiance, and for that, humanity would suffer. The retaliation, the Zalzaroth responded in force. Their fleet, now fully assembled, advanced toward Earth in a formation designed for planetary subjugation. These were not simple warships. They were annihilators, designed to erase resistance on a planetary scale. The strategy was simple. Break Earth's spirit. They didn't intend to wipe us out completely. Not yet. That would be wasteful. Instead, they would demonstrate their power. Show humanity what happened to those who defied the Dominion. The first attack came with precision. Cities were targeted, not by conventional weapons, but by something far worse. Localized. Gravitational distortions collapsed skyscrapers in seconds. Artificial singularities tore through infrastructure, swallowing entire districts, and then came the nerve disruptors. A horrifying weapon, one designed not to kill, but to cripple. Entire populations found themselves writhing in agony as invisible. Waves of energy short-circuited their nervous systems, not lethal, not permanent, but excruciating. It was psychological warfare at its finest, a demonstration of absolute superiority, and yet, something unexpected happened. Humanity did not beg for mercy. The impossible resistance. The Zalzaroth had encountered defiance before, but what they had never encountered was a species built for adversity. The nerve disruptors were meant to break our will. But humans adapted. Within hours, emergency medical teams had devised crude countermeasures, improvised shielding, drugs that numbed the pain, neural dampeners hacked together from existing technology. And the moment the agony subsided, humanity fought back. The counterattack was unlike anything the Dominion had ever seen. Militaries across the globe, once divided by politics and history, now stood as one. Fighter jets, reprogrammed drones, and high-altitude missile systems were synchronized with an efficiency no other species had ever displayed. Civilian hackers, some barely out of their teens, worked alongside military experts, breaking into enemy communication systems, jamming signals, and even turning their own targeting systems against them. Cities refused to fall. Every building became a fortress. Every street, a battleground. Every civilian, a soldier in their own right. And the Zalzaroth, who had never known an enemy that refused to surrender, began to realize something terrifying. They had underestimated humanity, the power of chaos. Of the greatest strengths of the Dominion had always been their order. They moved with precision. Their strategies were calculated down to the last detail, their soldiers disciplined beyond comprehension. Every battle they fought was a masterpiece of structure and efficiency. And that was exactly why they failed. Because humanity did not follow the rules. The counterattacks were erratic, unpredictable. A coordinated strike would be planned, only for an independent civilian group to disrupt the battlefield with an entirely unexpected attack. A Zalzaroth command ship would prepare to launch an orbital bombardment, only for a hijacked satellite to crash into its hull at high velocity. A city scheduled for annihilation would be evacuated, only for the entire population to reappear in a different part of the planet, striking from the shadows. The Dominion could not understand it. They were used to crushing enemies who thought like them, who fought with traditional tactics, who followed predictable patterns. But Earth was a storm. A relentless, chaotic storm of intelligence, adaptability, and raw, unbreakable will. The psychological war. And then, humanity did something even stranger. We started sending messages. Not pleas for surrender, not diplomatic requests, but taunts. Hacked signals began broadcasting directly into the Zalzaroth communication networks, mocking them, analyzing their every move, exposing weaknesses in their strategies before they even realized they had weaknesses. The Dominion commanders listened in disbelief as human operatives laughed in the face of death. A recorded message, intercepted on an enemy battleship, contained nothing but static, followed by a single phrase. We were polite. Until now. It was not just a battle anymore. It was a psychological war, and for the first time in its history, the Zalzaroth Dominion was afraid. The turning point. The realization struck them harder than any weapon ever could. This was not a conventional war. The Dominion had the superior technology, the superior firepower, the superior numbers. But humanity had something else, something far more dangerous. The ability to change. The longer the war dragged on, the faster we adapted. Weapons were reverse-engineered. Enemy armor was broken down and repurposed. Zalzaroth technology, once seen as impossibly advanced, was now being used against them. For the first time in history, the invaders were the ones on the defensive. And then came the final realization, the one that changed everything. The Dominion had never encountered a species that treated war the way humans did, because for humanity, war was not just about survival. It was evolution. And now, the Zalzaroth were no longer just fighting humans. They were fighting something new. Something they had created by trying to destroy us. Something that would not stop. Something that would never forget. The war had changed, and Earth was no longer fighting to survive. We were fighting to win. The Zalzaroth Dominion had faced resistance before, but never like this. They had expected humanity to collapse, to beg for mercy, to surrender once they saw the sheer scale of the force that had been sent to crush them. That was how it had always been. A species might fight back at first, out of desperation, out of fear, but in the end, they all fell. Except, humanity didn't fall. They adapted, they evolved. And now something was happening that the Dominion had never encountered in all their centuries of conquest. The war was turning against them. The art of war, humanity's greatest weapon. The Zalzaroth had always seen war as a simple equation. More power meant inevitable victory. It was a belief rooted in their history, in their biology. Their empire had expanded through raw military strength. Those who resisted were annihilated. Those who submitted were enslaved. But Earth had a different philosophy. Humans were not the strongest species in the galaxy, nor the fastest, nor the most advanced, but they were the most dangerous. Not because of their weapons, not because of their numbers, because of their minds. Because unlike any species the Zalzoroth had ever encountered, humans studied war. They lived it, breathed it, perfected it. From the moment humans learned to sharpen sticks, they had been finding ways to kill. From the first crude stone tools to nuclear warheads, every advancement had been shaped by conflict. Every empire that rose and fell left behind knowledge, strategies, tactics, philosophies, refined over thousands of years. It was in our history. It was in our nature. And now, the Zalzoroth were facing an enemy that didn't just fight. They played the game better than anyone, turning weakness into strength. The Dominion had expected the war to be over in days, maybe weeks. Instead, they found themselves bogged down in a conflict they could not comprehend. They had come prepared to destroy humanity with overwhelming firepower. But firepower wasn't enough, because every time they used a new weapon, humans found a way around it. Their gravitic lances, capable of collapsing cities, neutralized with makeshift counter-gravity fields scavenged from downed enemy ships. Their nerve disruptors, designed to cripple populations, rendered useless by a combination of medical ingenuity and sheer human resilience. Their planetary bombardments meant to terrorize. They only made humanity angrier, and then came the worst realization of all. The longer the war continued, the more advanced humanity became, because every battle was a lesson, every defeat an opportunity to learn. Within weeks, scientists had reverse-engineered Dominion technology, developing weapons that shouldn't have been possible for a species that had only recently discovered faster-than-light travel. Within months, Earth's forces had grown from a ragtag planetary defense force to a galactic power. Within a year, humanity wasn't just resisting, they were hunting. The hunters become the hunted at first. The Zalzoroth had been the ones on the offensive. Their fleets had descended upon Earth like gods of war, confident in their supremacy. Now, they were the ones being hunted. Human strike teams, elite units operating in the black void of space, began targeting Zalzoroth supply lines. They moved like shadows, striking without warning, vanishing before reinforcements could arrive. Entire Dominion warships disappeared without a trace, their crews left floating in the cold void. Planetary outposts, once seen as untouchable, were infiltrated and wiped out overnight. The Zalzoroth had thought themselves the apex predators of the galaxy, but humans weren't just predators. They were monsters. The kind that didn't just kill. The kind that adapted to whatever you threw at them. The kind that enjoyed the hunt. The message that changed everything. Then came the moment that would change the course of the war forever. A single transmission, intercepted by dozens of Dominion warships. It wasn't a plea for surrender. It wasn't a desperate call for peace. It was a warning, a deep, distorted human voice, carried across the void, speaking. In flawless Zalzoroth dialect, you had your chance. We were polite. Until now. And then, silence. For the first time in Dominion history, an enemy had not just resisted. They had declared war. The fall of the First Fleet. The Zalzoroth High Command knew they had made a mistake. They had assumed this war would be like every other. That humanity would be just another name on their long list of conquered worlds. Now they realized the truth. This wasn't just a battle. This was a fight for survival, and they were losing. The Dominion had sent a massive fleet to crush Earth. But now, that fleet was in disarray. Human forces, still vastly outnumbered, had somehow managed to turn the tide. Every battle left more Dominion warships crippled. Every skirmish saw more of their technology stolen, repurposed, and used against them. And then, the unthinkable happened. The First Fleet, the same fleet that was supposed to bring Earth to its knees, was destroyed. Not by superior firepower, not by overwhelming numbers, by a species that refused to play by the rules. The wreckage of Dominion warships now floated in Earth's orbit. Burning, shattered. The once invincible armada. Gone, and the galaxy watched. Because now the unthinkable had happened. A species that should have been nothing more than a footnote in the Dominion's history had defeated them. A species that shouldn't have stood a chance had changed the course of galactic history. And for the first time, the strongest empire in the galaxy was afraid. The galaxy had changed overnight. The Zalzaroth Dominion, once the undisputed apex predator, now had to face a reality they had never known before. They were losing. Their first fleet, the pride of their empire, the force that had crushed 100 civilizations, was gone. Not crippled, not retreating, destroyed. And the worst part? It wasn't because of superior firepower, it wasn't because of overwhelming numbers. It was because of something the Dominion could not begin to understand. A species that refused to break the psychological collapse of an empire. The Dominion had never known fear. From the moment of their expansion, they had conquered world after world with ruthless precision. Every species they encountered, they had dominated with ease. Their entire society was built upon the certainty of their strength. And now, that certainty was shattered. Whispers began to spread through the Dominion's vast network of colonies. Entire sectors, once loyal without question, now hesitated. For the first time, their soldiers began to doubt. Their leaders began to argue. The idea of defeat, a concept that had never existed in their history, had suddenly become real. And all of it was because of humanity. A species they had once considered primitive. A species that should have submitted. A species that had now turned into their greatest nightmare. The human counteroffensive begins. But while the Dominion was paralyzed by doubt, humanity did not hesitate. They had been on the defensive. They had fought to survive. Now, they were fighting to win, and Earth had a message to the galaxy. You thought you could break us. You thought we would kneel. Now it's our turn. The counteroffensive was unlike anything ever seen in galactic history. Humanity, once limited to a single planet, now began expanding outward with terrifying speed. Captured Zalzaroth ships were retrofitted and turned against their former masters. Entire fleets were built using stolen technology, designed not for defense, but for attack. Strike teams infiltrated Dominion-controlled worlds, inciting rebellions, where none had ever existed. Weapons of war were no longer just human or alien. They were something new, something forged from the destruction the Dominion had brought upon Earth. And the first target? The Zalzaroth homeworld itself. The hunt for the overlords. The Dominion was ruled by a caste of warlords, ancient beings, who had overseen the Empire's conquests for centuries. They had never been threatened, never known what it was like to be hunted. That changed when humanity sent a single message directly to their high command. It was not a demand for surrender. It was not an offer for peace. It was a declaration. You started this war. You came to our world. Now, we're coming to yours. The overlords panicked. For the first time in history, the Zalzaroth withdrew entire fleets, not to reinforce their front lines, but to defend their homeworld. But it was already too late, because the humans were not coming with fleets. They were coming with something worse. The Masters of War. The Zalzaroth had always assumed victory came from overwhelming force. They had believed that the strongest fleets, the deadliest weapons, and the largest armies were all that mattered. Humanity had proven them wrong, because humans had something no empire could match. They had warriors. Not soldiers, not conscripts. Warriors, elite, human strike teams, composed of the most dangerous minds from every nation. Every military, every battlefield on Earth, were unleashed upon the Dominion. They didn't attack like an invading force, they attacked like hunters. Stealth ships slipped past planetary defenses, undetected. Cyber warfare crippled entire planetary grids in minutes. Assassinations targeted key Dominion commanders, spreading chaos within their ranks. Entire bases went dark overnight. No explosions, no warnings, just silence. The Dominion did not even see the attacks coming. One by one, their leaders vanished. The overlords, once untouchable gods, now lived in fear. And then came the final brutal realization. They had not just lost a war. They had created something they could never control. The warning to the galaxy. The war was no longer just between humanity and the Dominion. The rest of the galaxy had been watching. Other empires, other civilizations, many of whom had once feared or resented humanity, now saw them as something else. Not just survivors, not just warriors, but a force of nature. And then, Earth sent out a message, a transmission that reached every corner of the known galaxy. To those who would bring war to our worlds, to those who think they can break us. Remember this. We were polite. Until now. It was not a threat. It was not a warning. It was a promise. The final blow. The Zalzoroth Dominion was collapsing, not because of lost battles, not because of conquered territory, but because they had lost something far worse. Their fear. They had ruled through intimidation, through the belief that they were unstoppable. But now, the galaxy had seen them defeated, by a species that should have never stood a chance, by a species that had turned war into an art form. The once mighty empire fractured. Entire sectors rebelled. Their own generals turned on each other, and in the ruins of what was once the most feared civilization in the galaxy, only one name was whispered with fear. One name that would never be forgotten. Earth. The war was over. Not with a single decisive battle, not with a formal surrender. The Zalzoroth Dominion did not end in fire and blood, as so many civilizations had before it. It ended with fear. Fear of the unknown. Fear of something they had never faced before. Fear of humanity. The ashes of an empire. Across the galaxy, the once mighty Dominion was unraveling. The war had broken their fleets. The counteroffensive had shattered their chains of command. But it was the fear of humans that ultimately brought their empire to its knees. Entire worlds, once enslaved under Zalzoroth rule, rose up in rebellion. Their overlords, who had ruled with absolute authority, now abandoned their thrones and fled into the void, seeking refuge in the darkest corners of space. Dominion warlords, once arrogant beyond measure, turned on each other, fighting to carve out their own territories before humanity arrived. And for the first time in history, the Zalzoroth begged for peace. They sent emissaries to Earth. They offered reparations. They swore to never attack again. They even proposed an alliance, desperate to save what remained of their shattered empire. But humanity did not answer, because humanity did not negotiate with monsters. And then, Earth sent out one final transmission. It was short. It was simple, and it changed the galaxy forever. This is the end of the Dominion. We are not conquerors. We do not seek to rule. But let it be known, if any empire, any warlord, or any tyrant ever threatens Earth again, there will be no mercy. We were polite. Until now. A new order. The fall of the Dominion was not just a shift in power. It was the birth of a new age. For the first time in galactic history, the balance had changed. No longer was Earth a small, insignificant world on the fringes of known space. No longer was humanity a species to be ignored or underestimated. Now, the galaxy feared them, and with that fear came something even greater. Respect. Other empires, some of whom had once considered invading Earth, now sought alliances instead. Diplomats, who once saw humanity as nothing more than a minor species, now treated them as equals, or superiors. Even civilizations that had warred with each other for centuries took notice. Because humanity had done what no other species had ever accomplished, they had defeated the strongest force in the galaxy. They had hunted the hunters, and they had done it on their own terms. The watchful guardians. But Earth did not seize control of the Dominion's territories. They did not demand tribute. They did not claim war spoils. Instead, they watched. They waited. Human fleets did not occupy worlds. They patrolled them, ensuring no new tyrants rose from the ashes. Human special forces operated in the shadows, eliminating threats before they could grow. Earth had no interest in conquest, but they would never allow another Dominion to rise again, because humanity had learned a lesson far greater than war. What it means to be human in the fires of destruction. Earth had been reforged. They had been attacked. They had suffered. But they had endured. And now, they carried something no other species had. Not just the strength to fight. Not just the power to win. But the will to protect. Humanity had not just survived. They had become something more. A force of nature. A legend whispered in the darkest corners of space, and across the stars one truth remained. You do not start a war with Earth because we were polite. Until now. Final call to action. This is just the beginning. The galaxy is vast, and the stories of Earth's rise are far from over. If you want to see what happens next, join us. Every great journey starts with a few brave explorers, and HFY Chronicles-849 is just beginning. If you love unraveling the mysteries of the universe, hit subscribe. It's free, and it helps us grow this community together. And now, I leave you with a question. What happens when a species forged by war becomes the galaxy's greatest guardian? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And remember, Earth may be quiet, but we are never weak. See you in the next one.